Can you believe it? It is another Tuesday evening here in Walking in Spirit and Truth, and it's good to be here with you again. This is John Craig, and I am pastor of Life of Worship Ministries. Sandi and I pastor here at Life of Worship, and it's really good to be back with you again on Walking in Spirit and Truth on the Lamb Network. So we are going to continue with our study this evening on the book of For Ezra, also known as Two Esdras. And I'm going to pull that up. I had my Bible. I had it all ready to go, and I had it marked. And you know what I did? Yeah, I picked it up, and it fell, and my marker fell out. And oh, my goodness. So I got to pull that back up for everybody. But I am really excited about some of the things we're going to be talking about today, because it's going to give us wisdom. Do you want wisdom? And do you want something to chew on? Do you want something that's going to be changing your life? Do you want something that's going to have an effect on how you look at life and your eternal perspective? You know, way back when I was in college, I was involved in a campus ministry called Campus Crusade for Christ. And I can't use that word crusade anymore because it has negative connotations. So anyway, but that's the name of the ministry I was part of. And one of the things that they really emphasized a lot on was an eternal perspective. And I tell you what, I read a lot of different books on eternal perspective, and one of the things, I think Sandi and I actually read this one book, and it was A Divine Revelation of Hell by Mary K. Baxter. I think that's her name. That's the author of it. And boy, I tell you what, getting an eternal perspective on what she wrote in that book. And that book is from a direct experience that she had, and where she went and she prayed. Well, she was spending time with prayer, and she had an encounter with the Lord. And in that encounter, she was told by Yeshua that she was going, for the next 30 days, every night she was going to be taken on a tour of hell. Some would call it Sheol. Some would call it Hades. Some would call it whatever. But anyway, she calls it a divine revelation of hell. And so she, every night when she went to sleep and she lay down to go to sleep, Yeshua would come and grab her by the hand, and she would pick her up, and, well, I don't want to say carry her, but walked her into different compartments and dimensions of hell. And that book is about her experience in walking through in this thing. And by the time, she said, after a few days of doing this, it was so horrifying and so terrifying and so just horrible that she dreaded going to bed and going every night. And because she knew what she was about ready to experience, and it was going to be in a whole nother dimension. Talking about an eternal perspective. But during that time, of course, she was with Yeshua, and she was walking this, and she smelled, and she saw, and she heard, and she could feel all of these different things that are described within Scripture. And she actually goes into the Scripture, and everywhere where it talks about Sheol and talked about Hades, talked about hell in and of itself, and all of its characteristics, and who is there, and what was going on, and the torment and the activity, and all of the different things, and how horrific it was. And these were events that were going to be going on for eternity for every soul that was in there. Talk about an eternal perspective. So I read that book. Sandi and I actually read that book many years ago. It was probably over 20 years ago. And it was recommended by a dear lady that we had become friends with, and she's since passed away, but she had recommended it. We read it, and we were like, oh my goodness, that is just the craziest thing. But a lot of times we don't want to think about, well, I'm saved and I'm protected. I follow Torah, all this sort of stuff. Honestly, we should all keep this perspective, an eternal perspective, in mind. And so with that said, I'm going to throw up a banner here, and so it'll roll across the screen for just a little bit, and it's for Life of Worship Ministries here in Amarillo, Texas. And like I said, Sandi and I pastor Life of Worship Ministries, and we have been putting up a request for to help us with finances. We have come into a shortfall of finances, and we had a big fundraiser that came through in the spring, and it really helped out, and it covered us for 6 months. And now we got to push it. We got to push another fundraiser because we do have bills for this ministry that we need to take care of. And in order to have a place to gather at, we have to pay a lease. We do have to pay for lights and gas and internet hookup and phones and water and all the different things that go along with the ministry, and including ink and paper and all of that. So anyway, if you have not had an opportunity, and I know there's so many appeals for people, so please donate to our ministry, and we want you to pray about that. We need financial partners with us. We need people to say, hey, we think your ministry is worthy. We think that your ministry is worth continuing and reaching out from Amarillo, Texas, reaching across through to different nations around the world through this streamcast. And we want you to join with us as prayer partners, as financial partners, and we would certainly appreciate your help. Thank you so much to everyone that has helped us out and that has blessed us to help us meet those bills. So there's our website scrolling across your screen. It's www.lifeofworshipamarillo.org, and go there. There is a donate button that you can tap or click on, and be generous. I know there's a lot of people that are very well blessed, even in the economy that we have today, and that can help us out. We know that there's been many people that out of their need they've given, and we just pray God's blessing on you, and thank you so much for your generosity. Okay. That's all I'm going to say about that right now. I do want to say that on Shabbat, if you want to join us for our Torah portion, that is it's at 12 o'clock Central, 12 o'clock Central, and we have a Torah portion. It's online, and you can join us there in the chat room and make comments and all that sort of fun stuff. We've got a number of people that join us over there, where we go into the Torah portion, and we're looking for Yah's revelation as we go through the Torah portions of the year. And every year is a little bit different. Every year is, there's the foundational things, and then there's that element where the Spirit is really speaking to the congregation. And we want to have ears to hear and eyes to see what the Spirit is speaking to us about. So that's Shabbat at 2. And then at 3, we have our encounter service, and where we have a time of praise and worship and ministry, as well as a follow-up message. Now, I do want to say this, over on our it's here on our Life of Worship Ministries channel, and you can go back and catch the last 3 messages that Pastor Sandi was leading on, talking about some of these foundational things about what many people call their New Testament faith, our New Covenant faith that comes with Yeshua. Many of us came out of the Christian churches. We have roots that take us all the way. We have these Hebraic roots that we've been following. Well, we have been going into depth about the restoration of the rod of Aaron and the significance of the root of the Zadok priesthood that goes straight back to Aaron from the line of Eleazar and Pinchas, Phineas, and it is the Zadok priesthood that we see in Ezekiel, and the coming of the temple that Yah establishes. So that is something that I really recommend everybody, because these are the out of that community, out of the Essene community, and out of which many of the disciples, even we have these connections that even Peter, or I'm sorry, not Peter, Peter, but also Paul, You can see many of the writings that parallel those things that we've been finding in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So very important things, but in this is revolutionary change in understanding who we are in Messiah. So that's all I'm going to say about that right now. Go back and listen to those 3 messages. And if anything, go back and listen to this last week where Pastor Sandi goes in and was talking about Stephen and the disciples and Mary and Martha and these characters that we see in the New Testament, in the Brit Hadashah, and see who is it? Who are these people that are part of our foundation in faith? Okay. All right. Now that I've said all that, let's get over to Ezra and pick up where we left off last week and review a couple different things. Let's see, that we were talking about, and then pull in the next chapter. So if you are looking at and you have got a Bible with the Apocrypha in it, and remember, Apocrypha means a revealing. It's a revealing. And so this is one of the parts. So you have Ezra, and who is a scribe. He is a priest in the Zadok line, and he was in captivity, and he was the one who came back to oversee the building and the rebuilding of the temple. So there at the beginning, the second temple. So he's in the second temple period, and that second temple period so begins at the end of the exile from Babylon, and it carries over through the 400 silent years. And in his writings, people said, well, he's maybe, second temple period. Yes, he's second temple period. Some tried to say he is even a contemporary of the first century believers, but he wasn't. Some say that maybe he was in the first century before the Common Era. But I'm going to just say this. No, by reading this and looking at it, I would say that Ezra comes, this is the same Ezra that wrote the Ezra that's in our common Bibles, and it's in the Tanakh. And hey, Linda, it's great to see you. I'm glad that you joined us this evening. Shalom, shalom. So we've been talking about this, and last week I talked about this test, and that was in Ezra chapter 7. And so Ezra was talking about, hey, and then this is just simply a quick review. So he's simply saying, hey, and he's talking to the angel Uriel, and he's just talking about, and Uriel's talking to him. It says, now therefore, why disquiet yourself, Ezra, seeing you are but a corruptible man? In other words, you're imperfect. You're imperfect as man. So you and I, this is what he's saying, you and I are imperfect. And why are you moved? Whereas, because you're just a mortal, why are these things going through your mind? Why have you not considered in your mind this thing that is to come rather than that which is present? In other words, why are you so focused on the future as opposed to living in the present? And he said, because that's so, it's like too much for you. It's too big of a thing. These things that are going to be upon the people in the future. And why are you concerning yourself with it? You're corruptible. You're imperfect. You're mortal. These are the things that are for the Most High to be so considering. And he says, then I answered and I said, oh, Yahweh Adonai, you have ordained in your Torah that the righteous should inherit these things, but that the wicked should perish. Nevertheless, the righteous shall suffer straight things and hope for wide. For they have done wickedly, have suffered the straight things, and yet shall not see the wide. So in other words, he's saying, look, these are, kind of metaphorically speaking, the straight things or these narrow things. These are the difficulties of life. And these are the things that we deal with as humans, as being a descendant of Adam. And he's saying, the wide things. What are the wide things? The wide things is like when things open up and it's just beautiful, and there's more than enough, because it's like a field that's bountiful, and there's so much provision, and we suffer these straight things, or these narrow things, these difficult things, these things with obstacles in it, these things are difficult to walk through. And why don't we ever come out on the other side yet? Why is it that we just have this? And Yahweh says to him, there is no judge above Elohim, and none that has understanding above El Elyon. For there be many that perish in this life, because they despise the Torah of Elohim that is set before them. Now, they despise the Torah of Elohim. We're not talking, now some people get on here and says, oh, you're just talking Jewish things. No, we're not talking Talmud or Mishnah or any of these other commentaries that are in the Jewish faith. We're not talking about that. We're talking Torah. Torah is the Hebrew word for instructions. The instructions are the word of God. And that's from the very beginning to the very end. Everything that's considered Torah are God's instructions to us. We see the Torah as the first 5 books of the Bible, but we also see the instructions of God also include all the way through Revelation. It's all so that they build a foundation, and then by which we can live, and then which causes us to allow us to focus and grow and be encouraged to always look to the Torahs. This is the Torah of God. Because they despise the Torah of Elohim that is set before them, for Elohim has given straight commandments to such as came. So straight commandments. In other words, there's no flaw in them. They're straightforward. These commandments. And what should you do to live? In other words, the straight commandments are for those who are alive, those who come into this life, pass through this life, and how to live, in other words. And even as they came, what they should observe to avoid punishment. It's pretty straightforward, right? We went over this last week, but this is just a quick review. Nevertheless, they were not obedient to him. So think about everybody that's passed through life, and they've had these commandments in order to show us how to live and how to avoid punishment. Think of that as the bottom line. God gave us his commandments so that we can live, and is live in this life and to live in the life to come, and to avoid punishment. Straightforward. Nevertheless, they were not obedient unto him. But they spoke against him. They imagined vain things and deceived themselves by their wicked deeds. How do you deceive yourself by a wicked deed? You ever think about that? How do you deceive? In other words, thinking that I can do this, and hey, nothing bad came of it, and therefore, if I keep doing this and nothing bad comes over it, then it must be okay to do. Deceive. And what is a wicked deed? It's something that is against Torah. That these are against these straight commandments, is what basically he's saying. So wicked deeds are these things that we do thinking that there's no consequences to it. And yet, so this is one of the categories. They deceive themselves by their wicked deeds, and said of El Elyon that he is not. Yeah, you're right, Linda. Or God, I can do this, but God will forgive me. That's deception. If one is just simply begging or just thinking that because God's mercy always seems to be extending, that he'll forgive us as if there's no consequences to it. I mean, that's really, really pushing it, don't you think? It's taking his mercy for granted. And then he says, and deceive themselves by their wicked deeds, and said of Elyon that he is not. In other words, he probably is not listening. He's probably not watching. Oh, he's too busy with other things. How am I so significant that he would be that he would be concerned with even the very things that I do? I mean, any excuse will do, right? Or literally coming out and saying, well, I don't believe in God. I don't believe that God is everybody has their own God. Everybody has has their own way of believing in God or their own way of following God. In other words, that's just saying that they are saying of El Elyon that he is not. He is, so this God right here is not really convenient for me. So I'm going to have a God made up in my own image, a Jesus in my own image. And I'm going to follow that Jesus. I'm going to follow that God. I'm going to follow that El, but it's not El Elyon. They're probably following a God. It's a God. It's one that's deceiving them. And as I talked at Sukkot about these lesser gods, these are ones that come in to draw away, that will give our attention and devotion to anything that might look like God, but does not have the same commandments. So holding to this form of godliness, but denying its power. That's how I would put it. And knew not his ways. And knew not his ways. In other words, that's the Old Testament. That we don't need to be so concerned with that. That's just for the past, and that's for them, or that's for the Jews, or that's, that's for the people who want to be under the law. We've heard all those different things. And knew not his ways. Well, I got the New Testament. That's enough. Well, if all you want to do is look at the wall hangings and not know why that the wall hanging actually hangs on a wall that actually is that wall is secured to a foundation, and I want to know what that foundation is, or if you're trying to hang, because that's what I say the Brit Hadashah is like. The Brit Hadashah is like your wall hangings. It's your decoration in the house. But the problem is, if you don't have the foundation, which is the Torah, and then the writings and the prophets are like the walls and the roof. So what's left is the Brit Hadashah, and that's your decorations, that's your furnishings, that's the stuff you put on the walls, and so if you don't have the foundation or the walls or the roof, then you're going to take your picture and go to hang it, and it's just going to fall and it's going to shatter. There's not going to be any place for it. You're going to keep trying to put it up. It's going to fall and shatter. It's not going to work out for you very well. And so anyway, that you got to have this foundation, and this is what Ezra is trying to tell us. All right. Okay. Enough of that. We went over all that last time. So let's go on ahead and move into chapter 8. Well, the latter part of chapter 7. I'm not sure. I think we went over this and we talked. Yeah, we did. Because at one point in time, Ezra is sitting here and he's being encouraged. And through this dialogue that he's having, ultimately, he sees that kind of like how we see in Ecclesiastes that everything is vanity. Everything is vanity. In other words, it's so much time and effort spent trying to figure things out. And just when we think we have it figured out, then it's really not right. And because some of the things are just so big for us, we're trying to comprehend, and then we develop systems and programs and rituals and all these things and furnishings all the way around this stuff, and it's all vanity. In other words, it's all worthless. It's all pointless because we've put so much emphasis into it, and then we miss the very thing that Yah is trying to tell us about himself, and that is where we see in Ezra chapter 8 that he's patient, he's bountiful, he's full of great mercy, that he pardons iniquity, that he's full of forgiveness. And this is what leads us into chapter 8 for Ezra. And because of our finite ability to understand, and because we are so limited, even in the most creative imaginations, we still don't understand how even the mercy of God works. That's why that's why the mercy of God gets abused. Think about all these congregations that are out there, even those that are even people that are in the Hebrew roots, thinking, man, I've got this Torah thing down. I'm really trying to follow it. And yet they'll begin to err on the side of I don't know if you want, I don't know if legalism is the right word, but I think part of the character of those are we would maybe characterize them as Torah, like the Torah police, and that are ready to point every single little flaw that because the reason why those people are around is that they're missing the whole point of the revelation of the relationship, and that's what the purpose of the mercy and the patience and literally great mercy, the bountifulness, the the pardoning of iniquity and forgiveness is all about is this character dimension of the Most High that He really, really wants us to know. And we don't learn that character issue of the Most High in all of those facets by pushing the limits of mercy so that more mercy can be extended. No, we come into the full knowledge of that understanding of the depths of that mercy is because we begin to see us as He sees us, who we really are. Uh, his his creation in desperate need of His mercy, because we begin to see ourselves next to Him, and the perfection of His beauty, and how far we come short. And when we see that vision, that true vision of ourselves, then we truly see His mercy. We won't see it any other way. We don't push the limits. Oh, the blood of Jesus, the blood of Yeshua. I use the term Jesus on purpose. Oh, it covers me, covers all my sins, because it's used to the point of where someone says, I really don't fathom the depths of the mercy that I'm allowed to even enjoy at this point in time. Ezra chapter 8 verse 1 says, and He answered me, saying, El Elyon has made this world for many, but the world to come for few. And that is, out of all these different things, there have been huge sobering statements that are been said that we've even talked about here. And yet here in verse 1 of chapter 8 for Ezra, and he makes this statement, El Elyon has made this world for many, but the world to come for few. And I think about that. I think about, how many are called and few are chosen. I think that's over in Romans. In Romans chapter 8, verse 29, for whom He foreknew, He also predestined to be conformed to the image of His Son, that He might be the firstborn among many brethren. In whom He predestined, these He also called. In whom He called, these He also justified. In whom He justified, these He also glorified. And so when I think about that, a lot of times people get in, oh, you're talking about predestination and all that. No, is that the invitation is opened up to so many, but then on the other hand, how many just take for granted that the invitation is always there? How many are actually, take for granted that the invitation is so broad, and that we do little to keep it? It's kind of like I was hearing someone talk about this the other day, and talking about how salvation is free, which it is. So the world to come, the invitation, the acceptance of the invitation, the world to come is free. But there is a requirement, and there are stipulations in order to receive the reward of the world to come. Does that make sense? I think it makes sense. So so that's one of the things that I was just thinking about is that, so the stipulation is that no, we didn't earn our salvation, but because we chose to follow Yeshua, well, to be his disciple, we follow in his ways. Okay, and I know that seems pretty simplistic, and we all know that type of thing, but in reality, I just think about, well, is that how well do we do that? Because, you know, for me, I've been a believer since I was 19 years old. Do you believe that's like ages ago? What am I? So that's like 40 years ago. 40 years ago, I came to Yeshua. I was age 19. Yeah, now you do the math, you know how old I am, okay? All right. So I'm fixing to hit the next mile marker in my life. And so here we have this challenge that that we have, and then we think about, we walk with Yeshua all of these years, and then I see this. I mean, it was so much like this when I was when we had this huge youth group. We had a pretty good number, and we would load up a bus and take them to youth camp at Christ for the Nations down in Dallas, and which was tremendous, just a tremendous place. I mean, they did it really well, and there was probably 1,000 kids there, and our kids, I mean, every year we took them down there, they were so fired up. And that was not the only place that we took them. We took kids over to other camps, but they would come back and they were so fired up. They loved Yeshua. They like, I want to devote my whole life to it. And they're looking like, I want to be involved in ministry, and I want my life to count, and all that. It's an eternal perspective. And then they'd come back and they'd give their testimonies. We'd always have the youth day when they come back from camp, and they give their testimonies before the congregation. And, and I'd be so sad because here they're fired up, and I'm just so happy. As a pastor, it just fills your heart with joy. And the parents and the other people in the congregation would listen like, yeah, okay. Yeah, that fire is going to burn out. So yeah, I don't know. We'd really like to see this to be a real thing and to be contagious and all that, but they wouldn't even allow, because it was their kids. Oh, it's just the kids being excited, and I could be disheartened if I looked at them, the parents, the adults, too long, and think about, oh man, they're just not getting it. They just not getting it. Because here I am, I'm the same age as their parents. I'm the same age as the other adults in the room. And yeah, so I've been around the block, but the fact is that we have to spark our relationship with the Most High. We have to keep it renewed. We got to keep the fire going. This is one of these conundrums of life, that we can't allow the worries and the concerns of life to snuff out the fire that's within us, and then find ourselves somehow disqualified and unable to stand before the Son of Man when he comes. And the older I get, the more real it is. Maybe it's because the older I get, the more I know that I have less time on this earth, barring the greater exodus and the return of Yeshua. And so knowing that time gets shorter and shorter, then I think about, okay, have I disqualified myself? And how is it that I need to live to carry this through? What is the fire that's going to keep it burning? And so let's go on. I was going to try to look up that verse. Many are called, few are chosen. Let's see if I can look it up online real quick. There it is, Matthew 22:14. Yeah, it's just not red in the blue letter Bible. Anyway, it says, for many are called, but few are chosen. That's Matthew 22, verse 14, where he's talking about the parable of the marriage feast. So, all right, good to know. All right. And yeah, Linda, I did look up that other one, verse 20, verse 16. I think it runs parallel with it, honestly. It says, thus the last shall be first, and the first last. So remember what I just read here in Ezra, for Ezra, chapter 8, verse 1, for many, the El Elyon has made this world for many, but the world to come for few. But I tell you something to ponder on. And he's talking about, think about this. When you ask the earth, it shall say unto you that it gives such mold, in other words, clay. I think I talked about this last week, where earthen vessels are made, but little dust that gold comes of. In other words, the earth produces a lot of clay, but very little gold. Even so is the course of this present world. There be many created, like the dust of the earth, that makes clay and all that sort of stuff, but few shall be saved. There's very little that's gold. And we talked about that, however, in Romans, about talking about gold, silver, and precious stones. Everything else burns up, right? The hay, the wood, the hay, the stubble. So answered I and said, swallow then down, O my soul, understanding and to devour wisdom. In other words, these are things worthy to be chewed on. And so, all right. So in this, he says, "Oh Yahweh," he has this prayer for maturity, that God would allow his servant, talking about himself, that we may pray before you, and you give us seed unto our heart and culture to our understanding, that there may be fruit of it. Because without his seed in us, growing up and being in good soil and being nurtured and cultured to bear fruit, otherwise it's all vanity. He's basically, this is what he's praying. He needs God's intervention here. And then he has this other prayer, and this goes on to some of those things that we did not talk about last week. And he has this prayer, and it's verse 20. "O Yahweh, you that dwell in everlastingness, which behold from above things in the heaven and in the air, whose throne is unestimable." In other words, okay, it's unfathomable. "Whose glory may not be comprehended, before whom the host of angels stand with trembling, whose service is conversant in wind and fire, whose word is true and sayings constant, whose commandment is strong and ordinance fearful." So think about, this is what Ezra is saying about the word of God. Whose service is conversant in wind and fire. So think about this. The word it's conversant. It is an exchange, like wind and fire. We always think about the wind of the Holy Spirit, the fire of the Holy Spirit. So this is his working within us, it's a powerful wind, and it burns with a great fire. His word is true. His sayings, his word, is constant. His commandments, his word, is strong. And his ordinance, his word, is fearful. And so when we think about that, what we were talking about earlier, about holding to a form of godliness but denying its power, how do we read the word just to read the word, or do we recognize that every word that's in that word is power? Every word that's in the black is power. Every word on that, the white background by which every word is printed upon, is fire. And then it goes on talking about this characteristic of God, whose look dries up the depths, and indignation makes the mountains melt away, which the truth witnesses. Oh, hear the prayer of your servant, and give ear to the petition of your creature. For while I live, I will speak, and so long as I have understanding, I will answer. Oh, look not upon the sins of your people, but on them which serve you in truth. Now, this is very profound, I think. This is just the fact that Ezra is having this perspective. He says, okay, don't look upon the sins of your people. And he's talking about you and me. He's talking about the people that are that are his people, even though they may be in captivity, even though they may have sins upon them, but they're his people. It's people that really they've given their hearts to him, but they're people. They've got this sin going on in their life. He says, "Oh, look not upon the sins of your people, but on them which serve you in truth." Okay, so they've got flaws, but they serve you in truth. "Regard not the wicked inventions of the heathen, but the desire of those who guard your testimonies in afflictions." So he says, don't regard those other people that are wicked and are doing bad things, but regard those whose desires, and they're living it out by guarding your testimonies, right? Shamar, they're shamaring. I'm going to use a Hebrew word and put it in the English, shamaring. Shamar, guarding, protecting your testimonies in afflictions. So even though the road is tough, they're guarding your testimonies in the midst of their afflictions. In other words, they're not throwing up their hands and saying, "Well, man, I'm done. I just can't handle it," or "Today it's done," or whatever, but they're just holding true. They're guarding it and they're holding it true in spite of persecutions, and in spite of the difficulties of trying to work it out. And employers saying, "Well, you can't have this day off," or employers, people at work that just say, "Oh yeah, wear your seats today." Just different things like that, and just people giving that little prod and that poke and saying, "Well, you see, you're not living it out perfectly." Going on, it says, "Think not upon those that have walked feignedly before you." So in other words, don't remember those times when we've been weak, uh, or even just, you've heard the term, fake it until you make it. Okay, we all have our flaws and we all have our masks, and we all put up our little, we show only what we want other people to see, but God knows our hearts, remember? And it says, "But remember them which according to your will have known your fear." In other words, they still come before you. They still recognize you as the Most High. They still bow down to you because they still recognize you, that you are perfect and that you are just and you're more than enough. "Let it not be your will to destroy them which have lived like beasts." Let it, yeah, even though we've just honestly aren't, on the sixth day, God created what? The beast of the field and Adam and mankind. And even though sometimes we don't live perfectly and we're no different than the beasts, or we're no different than those who walk without Torah, because as Pastor Sandy's taught many times and talks about, if we're not walking as man, that is, to live as man is to zakar, it's to remember to live according to the Torah, and if we don't, then we are like the beasts. "But to look upon them that have clearly taught your Torah, take no indignation at them which are deemed worse than beasts." The world looks at us when we teach Torah that we're deemed even worse than beasts. I mean, how many people that are these New Testament only people that look at us and accuse us of horrible things just because we want to live the word and they don't get it. And we want to tell people about Torah. We want to talk to people about our faith. "Take no indignation at them which are doomed worse than beasts, but love them that always put their trust in your righteousness and glory. For we and our fathers do language of such diseases, but because of sinners you shall be called merciful. For if you have desire to have mercy upon us, you shall be called merciful to us, namely, that have no works of righteousness." So even the very fact that we would say, "Oh, look at this good deed that I did. Look at this," why we just consider it as not in light of the mercies of God. And we just like, and maybe we're not like those people that are just so perfect in keeping Torah, or so perfect in keeping the ways of God, and maybe we have these shortcomings and these failings, and just like he's talking about, look how these things magnify the mercy of God. For the just, which have many good works laid up with you, shall out of their own deeds receive reward. For what is man that you should take displeasure at him? Or what is a corruptible generation that you should be so bitter toward it? For in truth there is no man among them that be born, but he has dealt wickedly, and among the faithful there is none which has not done amiss. In other words, even among the faithful, we've messed up. For in this, O Yahweh, your righteousness and your goodness shall be declared, if you be merciful unto them which have not the confidence of good works. So I just think about, do we just meditate on really what is it that we should even deserve the mercy of Yah? I've got Hebrews 2:6 here that goes along with that. Hebrews 2:6. If you got your Bible, go over there with me in Hebrews 2:6. Verse 5, starting verse 5. For he did not subject to angels the world to come, concerning which we are speaking. But one has testified somewhere, saying, what is man that thou rememberest him? Or the son of man that thou art concerned about him? Thou hast made him for a little while lower than the angels. Thou hast crowned him with glory and honor, and hast appointed him over the works of thy hands. Thou hast put all things in subjection under his feet. Now it's talking about two different things. And one of the things is, what is man that you remember him? And I mean, considering that it was man and mankind that put Yeshua even on the cross, sent him to that execution stake. Think about that. And yet Yeshua on the cross even has this, or on that tree, or on the stake, whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to use it by. And he says, "Oh Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Think about the tremendous amount of mercy that is. And that he's interceding for us about. And what is the result of the intercession here? That he's crying out to God. And here's the result. But I will rejoice over the disposition of the righteous, and I will remember also their pilgrimage, and the Yeshua, and the reward that they shall have. So for I indeed, verse 38, for indeed I will not think on the disposition of them which have sinned before death. So in other words, before death, he says, I will not think on the disposition of those which have sinned before death, before judgment, before destruction. But I will rejoice over the disposition of the righteous, and I will remember also their pilgrimage, and the Yeshua, in other words, and the salvation and the reward that they shall have. In other words, he's given us hope here that even in the midst of the frailty of our human condition, he's not going to think. Does that give us, say, that, whoa, then we can sin all the more? No, God forbid, even as Paul says it over in Romans chapters 5, 6, and 7. And he says, no, this is only to remind me that the condition of my humanness is needful of the mercy of Yah. And this is what Ezra is talking about. And this is what he also says, but I will rejoice over the disposition of the righteous, and I will remember also their pilgrimage and the Yeshua. In other words, the working out of their salvation in fear and trembling, which includes walking with Yeshua, and the reward and that they shall have. So there's hope for all of us, and that as we walk this thing out, and we walk this with Yeshua, And I mean, I'm telling you, we're holding tight to his seats. Are we not? We're holding tight. Don't leave us behind. Don't let me stumble. Don't let me fall. What do the seats remind us? It reminds us to walk in Torah, reminds us to stay on the path, that narrow path, the straight path, that path that's rugged, only one person at a time. We can't do it hand in hand with another person. We're holding to the tzitzits of Yeshua as we follow him on this path, because on one side is fire and on the other side is deep water, and we cannot stumble because it could create a fall. But it says he's going to rejoice over us as we walk this path. And I love this part, and as we just have a few minutes left, and he goes on, like as I have spoken now, so shall it come to pass. For as the husbandman sows such seed upon the ground, and the plants many trees, and yet things that is sown good in his season comes not up, neither does all that is planted take root. Even so it is of them that are sown in the world, they shall not all be saved. In other words, not every seed grows. Not every tree that's planted to bear fruit takes root and it dies. And he says, and that's what happens to those that shall not be saved. That's why not all are saved, because they didn't take root. They didn't bear fruit. They didn't grow. They never came out of the soil. They rotted in the soil they were planted in. I answered then and said, if I found grace, let me speak. So he's still interceding. He's still interceding. And like as a husband's seed perishes if it comes not up and receives not your rain in due season, or if there is too much rain and is corrupted by it, even so perishes man also, which is formed with your hands and is called your own image, because you are like unto him, for whose sake you have made all things and likened him unto the husband's seed. In other words, he's saying, but wait a minute, but what if the conditions aren't right? What if it's not enough rain or too much rain and the conditions weren't right and the seed rotted? He's like interceding. He's like, wait a minute. Be not wroth with us, but spare your people and have mercy upon your own inheritance, for you are merciful unto your creature. Then answered he me and said, things present are for the present, and things to come for such as be to come. For you come far short that you should be able to love my creature more than I. In other words, he's just saying, wait a minute. I don't think he's rebuking him for saying, oh, do you love these people more than I do? He's not saying that. He's just saying, wow, you love these people so much, but just remember, you're still coming far short of being able to love them more than I can ever love them. But I oftentimes draw nigh unto you and unto it, but never to the unrighteous. In this also you are marvelous before El Elyon, in that you have humbled yourself as it becomes you, and have not judged yourself worthy to be much glorified among the righteous. I just think that's really profound. It's just really awesome that he's saying this. And because he's just saying, look, Ezra, I see your heart, and yet in your heart, it's still not as much as that how big my heart is. And that is so humbling. And you've judged yourself as not even worthy. And yet this is basically saying the same thing that y'all told David, King David, after he murdered a man and took his wife. And it's basically saying, this is the heart, this contrite heart, this humble heart. This is what's acceptable to me. And so I'm just going to leave it right there. We're going to leave off in verse 50, where he's talking about, for many great miseries shall be done to them that in the latter time shall dwell in the world, because they have walked in great pride. But understand for yourself and seek out the glory for such as be like you. For unto you is paradise opened, the tree of life is planted, the time to come is prepared, plenteous is made ready, a city is built, and rest is allowed. Yea, perfect goodness and wisdom. So so just think about that. we're going to talk about that more next time. So I hope you've enjoyed it this evening as I've gone over these things that are here for Ezra, and those that are watching in the archive. Thank you so much for being part of it. Remember, their Life of Worship, Amarillo.org. If y'all so moves your heart, please listen and be generous, and go to our website, hit that donate button, and put in a special offering, and help us get caught up on these bills that we have. We certainly appreciate that. And I just want to say we love you, and just very grateful that you would take time to spend with me this evening. And so until next time, shalom.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.